Day 41. You know the number because you started counting on day 1, back when counting still felt like a productive use of your remaining energy. Your stomach stopped growling around day 4, which surprises almost everyone who hasn't been through it. You'd think the hunger gets louder. It doesn't. It gets quiet. Terrifyingly quiet. Right now, your heart is beating slower than a resting athlete's, not because you're calm, but because your body has made an executive decision to stop wasting fuel on things it considers optional. Things like maintaining a normal heart rate. You're cold in a warm room. Your fingers, when you press them into your own forearm, leave a dent that takes several seconds to disappear, because the fluid under your skin has nowhere productive left to go. And somewhere behind your ribs, an organ that has never once stopped working, since roughly 6 months before you were born, is quietly, systematically eating itself to keep you alive for one more day. That organ is your heart. Your body has started digesting your own heart muscle, and it's not an isolated malfunction, it's policy, the same policy a species that survived ice ages, famines, and 40-day biblical fasts has been running on for as long as it's existed. Hollywood loves a starvation story as long as it comes with a redemption arc attached. Tom Hanks talks to a volleyball for 2 hours and walks off the island lean and photogenic. James Franco saws through his own arm and gets a standing ovation. Life of Pi turns near starvation into a gorgeous hallucination involving a tiger and some phosphorescent whales. Even reality television, which loves to advertise starving contestants, pulls people the second their vitals dip. Because actual starvation isn't a dramatic weight loss arc. It's a slow-motion organ liquidation, and it is nowhere near as photogenic as a man with a nice beard staring at the ocean. For the first 6 to 24 hours, almost nothing dramatic happens, and that's exactly the problem, because it teaches you a false sense of security. Your liver has a stockpile of glycogen, which is basically sugar folded up into a compact storage form, sitting there for exactly this situation. It releases it into your bloodstream to keep your brain running on its preferred fuel, glucose. You feel hungry, maybe irritable, maybe you get a headache, the same sensation as skipping lunch, which fools people into thinking starvation is just an exaggerated version of that. It is not. Your liver's glycogen reserve is small, roughly the size of a bag of sugar, and your brain alone burns through a significant chunk of it just idling. By hour 36 to 48, that reserve is gone, and your body pivots into something called gluconeogenesis, which is your liver manufacturing new glucose out of things that were never meant to be fuel, primarily the protein in your own muscle tissue. This is the first moment your body starts consuming itself, not symbolically, literally. Amino acids get pulled out of muscle fiber and converted into sugar to keep your brain online. You'll feel fatigue that sleep doesn't fix. Your muscles start to feel subtly weaker, like you're moving through slightly thicker air. By day 2 or 3, your body makes its big strategic shift, the one that will define everything for the next several weeks. It switches to burning fat, and in doing so, your liver starts producing molecules called ketones, an alternative fuel your brain can actually run on when glucose gets scarce. This is the same metabolic state people voluntarily chase on a ketogenic diet, except your body isn't doing it by choice, it's doing it because it's out of options. You'll notice your breath starts to smell strange, slightly like nail polish remover or overripe fruit. That's acetone, a ketone byproduct, literally evaporating out through your lungs. Your appetite strangely starts to fade around here too. The gnawing, desperate hunger of day 1 softens into something duller, a kind of detached fog. It isn't your body healing, it's triage. Your nervous system deciding that constant hunger signals are a waste of energy it no longer has to spend. From roughly day 3 through the second week, you settle into what feels almost like a plateau, and it's the most dangerous kind of calm because underneath it, the demolition continues on schedule. Your body is now sparing muscle where it can, running primarily on stored fat, but fat alone can't supply everything your brain and organs need. So a steady trickle of muscle protein continues to be sacrificed, every single day, without exception. Your immune system runs almost entirely on protein. Antibodies are protein. Immune cells are built from protein, so as that protein gets diverted to keep your brain alive, your defenses against ordinary infection quietly collapse. A cold that a healthy person shrugs off can become the actual cause of death. For someone in prolonged starvation, which is a genuinely unfair twist, your body essentially betrays you to a common cough, because it was too busy cannibalizing your bicep to keep the immune system staffed. Your body temperature drops, because your metabolism has intentionally throttled itself down, the biological equivalent of a building shutting off floors it isn't using. Your heart rate slows, your blood pressure drops. Standing up too fast makes the room tilt, because your circulatory system doesn't have the fluid volume or the cardiac output to keep pace with gravity anymore. Your skin dries out and thins. Fine hair, called lanugo, can start growing on your body, an old evolutionary reflex trying uselessly to conserve heat. Your hair, the hair on your head, starts falling out because growing hair is metabolically expensive, and hair is, biologically speaking, the first thing to go when the household budget collapses. Somewhere past the second or third week, if this continues, you cross into the phase your body was never designed to survive for long. The phase where there simply isn't enough fat left to spare, and the muscle breakdown accelerates sharply because it has become the only fuel source left. Your heart is a muscle, working every second of every day of your life without a single break, and in advanced starvation, your body starts breaking down cardiac tissue for fuel, the same way it's been breaking down your biceps and your quadriceps. The heart shrinks. It loses mass. It loses the structural material it needs to generate a strong, coordinated contraction. This is the single most common actual cause of death in starvation, not simply running out of energy in some abstract sense, but the heart physically running out of the muscle fibers required to keep beating in rhythm. Making this dramatically worse is a quieter crisis happening at the same time, an electrolyte collapse. Potassium, magnesium, and phosphate, minerals your heart's electrical system depends on completely, get progressively depleted as your body's chemistry unravels. Your heart doesn't beat because it feels like it. It beats because of a precise electrical signal traveling through cardiac tissue in a specific sequence, and that signal depends on the right concentration of these minerals sitting on either side of every heart cell membrane. When those levels fall too far, the signal starts to misfire. This produces cardiac arrhythmia, an irregular, uncoordinated heartbeat, and in advanced starvation, this is frequently the final event, not a dramatic collapse. A skipped beat, then another, then a heart that simply loses its rhythm entirely and cannot recover it. Alongside this, you'll likely develop edema, a swelling in your legs, feet, and abdomen that looks almost like weight gain, which is one of starvation's cruelest visual jokes. It happens because your blood no longer carries enough protein, specifically albumin, to hold fluid inside your blood vessels the way it's supposed to, so that fluid leaks out into surrounding tissue instead. A starving body can look swollen in the belly while every visible bone in the shoulders and ribs is protruding, and that specific combination has a name, kwashiorkor, when it's driven primarily by protein deficiency, and it's one of the most visually devastating things malnutrition can produce. Mentally, you're not the same person anymore either. In the most detailed scientific record we have of this, a 1944 study at the University of Minnesota where volunteers underwent months of controlled semi-starvation, researchers documented something unexpected, an all-consuming, obsessive preoccupation with food. Men who had volunteered as calm, disciplined, conscientious objectors began collecting recipes, rearranging kitchen utensils for no reason, dreaming about meals, and in some cases developing genuine depression and irritability that had nothing to do with their personalities beforehand. Your brain, starved of steady fuel, doesn't just slow down, it narrows, fixating with increasing intensity on the one thing it desperately needs and cannot have. Eventually, if nothing intervenes, several systems collapse at once rather than any single dramatic event. Your weakened heart, running on depleted muscle and scrambled electrolytes, finally loses its rhythm for good. Or your exhausted immune system loses a fight against an infection a healthy body would have handled without you even noticing. Your organs, deprived of consistent blood pressure and starved of the protein needed to repair and maintain themselves, shut down in sequence. Consciousness fades as blood pressure falls too low to keep the brain adequately supplied. In an otherwise healthy adult with reasonable starting reserves, this entire process, from the first missed meal to the final failure, typically plays out somewhere between 45 and 70 days. In 1981, an Irish Republican prisoner named Bobby Sands, held in the Maze prison in Northern Ireland, refused all food starting on March the 1st, demanding political prisoner status rather than being classified as an ordinary criminal. He was 27 years old, weighed around 155 pounds when he started, and by the time the world was paying close attention, doctors and journalists watched in agonizing real time every stage we just walked through unfold in a real human body. He lost roughly 60 pounds. 41 days in, while still refusing food, he was elected to the British Parliament, a genuinely surreal collision of biology and politics, a dying man winning a seat in the House of Commons. By early May, his heart rhythm and organ function had deteriorated to the point where, on May the 3rd, he slipped into a coma, the exact endpoint that low blood pressure and cardiac strain predict. He died on May the 5th, 66 days after his last meal, one of the longest medically documented voluntary fasts to end in death. 9 more men on the same protest died in the following months, each one following essentially the same biological script we just described, because the human body, it turns out, doesn't really care about your politics, your willpower, or your cause. It runs the same shutdown sequence for everyone. Say you're not on a hunger strike, though, say you're lost or shipwrecked or trapped, and the food simply isn't there. Most of what happens next is decided by what you do or don't do in the first several days. First, water matters enormously more than food. You can survive weeks without eating, but only days without drinking. So prioritize hydration ruthlessly. And if it's available, a small amount of salt helps your body retain the fluid you do get instead of losing it. Second, movement is now your enemy. Every unnecessary calorie you burn is muscle, and eventually, cardiac tissue you're borrowing against. Rest, stay warm, minimize activity, resist the instinct to forage aggressively if it costs more energy than it returns. Third, and this is the counterintuitive one, if rescue comes, do not eat a full meal immediately, because reintroducing food too fast into a severely starved body can trigger something called refeeding syndrome. And it has killed people who survived the starvation itself, only to die from being fed. When Allied soldiers liberated concentration camp survivors in 1945, well-meaning troops handed out chocolate, biscuits, and rich soup, and thousands of survivors died within days because a sudden flood of carbohydrates causes a rapid insulin spike that drives phosphate and potassium out of the bloodstream and into cells all at once. And those are the exact minerals your already weakened heart needs to keep a stable rhythm. The correct protocol, if you're ever the one doing the feeding, is small amounts, slowly, over days, ideally with medical supervision monitoring electrolytes the entire time. Your body, after weeks of starvation, is a structure standing on a foundation it has been quietly eating for support, and even good news, arriving too fast, can knock it down. Subscribe, because next episode we cover a death where the body doesn't get 45 days to fight back.